Greetings, welcome back to Black Bear News. Please remember to like the video and to make sure that you are still subscribed. And just a quick thank you to all who have supported the channel, donated to the channel in the last few weeks. I've received your donations and I appreciate it. It's very, very helpful. So I wanted to cover this article in this video. This is from Vice, a section called Tech by Vice, by Nafeez Ahmed. And I've read things from Nafeez Ahmed before. This is from November 22nd, 2019. The collapse of civilization may have already begun. And this is not a new, that's not a new thought or a new concept. There are many indicators already all around us that indicate cracks or fissures in the edifice of our civilization. Some people call it being alarmist or fear-mongering or whatever, but it's really good to take notice and pay attention to those cracks, right? They're harbingers of possible problems to come. Scientists disagree on the timeline of collapse and whether it's imminent, but can we afford to be wrong and what comes after? And there you go. The disagreement on the timeline is, maybe it's important. I think it's, I don't know. Maybe it's important, maybe it's not. But if collapse is anywhere between next year and 20 years from now, it's still pretty soon. And if collapse is imminent, if say collapse is within the next 5 or 10 years, now is a pretty good time to take notice and take some action, right? Not wait until, if collapse is 5 years from now, probably not a good idea to wait until 2023 to go, hey, we could have a problem like real soon, right? So if collapse was next year, now if collapse is next year, a lot of people are like, well, that's it. We can't do anything about it now, right? But if collapse is 5 years from now, we could possibly maybe somehow take notice, take action, perhaps steer ourselves away from utter catastrophe, right? Instead of waiting until the year right before, or collapse is rearing its ugly head and the fangs are out, and then we're like, well, nothing we can do about it now, over the falls. That's how a lot of people like to operate. If collapse is imminent, or if catastrophe is imminent, the thing to do is take action right now. No matter what the timeline is, no matter if the timeline is 2022 or 2050 or 2080 or 2100, the time to take action is right now. It is now too late to stop a future collapse of our societies because of climate change, which is the initial quote here. These are not the words of a tinfoil hat donning survivalist. This is from a paper delivered by a senior sustainability academic at a leading business school to the European Commission in Brussels earlier this year. Before that, he delivered a similar message to a UN conference. Climate change is now a planetary emergency, posing an existential threat to humanity. At the very least, you might want to, let people know that this is a scientific, the probability is edging close to 100% or, right up on 100%. In the age of climate chaos, the collapse of civilization has moved from being a fringe taboo issue to a more mainstream concern. As the world reels under each new outbreak of crisis, record heat waves across the Western Hemisphere, devastating fires across the Amazon rainforest, the slow-moving Hurricane Dorian, severe ice melting at the poles, the question of how bad things might get and how soon has become increasingly urgent. The fear of collapse is evident in the framing of movements such as Extinction Rebellion, key word in their name, Extinction Rebellion, and in the resounding warnings that business as usual means heading toward an uninhabitable planet. But a growing number of experts not only point at the looming possibility that human civilization itself is at risk, some believe that the science shows it is already too late to prevent collapse. The outcome of the debate on this is obviously critical. It throws light on whether and how society should adjust to this uncertain landscape. The obvious adjustment is to minimize harm, not just to humans, but to all species and life on Earth. Minimize damage, minimize harm. Not to just, party down on the Titanic. People survived the Titanic, by the way. Yet this is not just a scientific debate. It also raises difficult moral questions about what kind of action is warranted to prepare for or attempt to avoid the worst. Scientists may disagree about the timeline of collapse, but many argue that this is entirely beside the point. While scientists and politicians quibble over timelines and half measures or how bad it'll all be, we are losing precious time. That's a key point to drive home. With the stakes being total collapse, some scientists are increasingly arguing that we should fundamentally change the structure of society just to be safe. This is evident in the growing number of people. Guy McPherson is no longer just the sole outlier, or possibly Michael Rupert could be another person. Could be one of those doomsday prophet type folks. But just even as recently as just a few years ago, there were only a very few people that were in the Guy McPherson camp. On a like a scientific level, or on a more mainstream level. And now that crowd, that number of people that are parroting his ideas and his talking points and his conclusions is growing. We have a growing number of people who are coming to exactly the same conclusion that he has come to. And the growing number of people becomes a consensus, like, hey, this isn't just somebody shouting, from the balcony that the theater is on fire. This is a lot of people are noticing the theater is on fire. So it's a rising chorus of voices. Jem Bendell, another one of those voices, a former consultant to the United Nations and longtime professor of sustainability leadership at the University of Cumbria's Department of Business, delivered a paper in May 2019 explaining how people and communities might adapt to climate-induced reduction. Bendell's thesis is not only that societal collapse due to climate change is on its way, but that it is in effect already here. Climate change will disrupt your way of life in your lifetimes, he told the audience at a climate change conference organized by the European Commission. Devastating consequences like the cascading effects of widespread and repeated harvest failures are now unavoidable. What are we seeing right now? We're seeing problems with harvesting crops this year, right now. He argues this is not so much a doom and gloom scenario as a case of waking up to reality so that we can do as much as we can to save as many lives as possible. His recommended response is what he calls deep adaptation, which requires going beyond mere adjustments to our existing economic system and infrastructure in order to prepare us for the breakdown or collapse of normal societal functions. Bendell's message has since gained a mass following and high-level attention, it is partly responsible for inspiring the new wave of climate protests reverberating around the world. Really? It's just Jem Bendel's message? He's part of a growing number of voices that have come to the same conclusion. In March, he launched the Deep Adaptation Forum to connect and support people who, in the face of inevitable societal collapse, want to explore how they can reduce suffering while saving more of society and the natural world. Over the last 6 months, the forum has gathered more than 10,000 participants. More than 600,000 people have downloaded Bendel's paper called Deep Adaptation, a map for navigating our climate tragedy, published by the University of Cumbria's Institute of Leadership and Sustainability, and many of the key organizers behind the Extinction Rebellion campaign joined the protest movement after reading it. There will be a near-term collapse in society with serious ramifications for the lives of readers, concludes the paper released in 2017. Catastrophe is probable, it adds, and extinction is possible. Over coming decades, we will see the escalating impacts of the fossil fuel pollution we have already pumped into the atmosphere and oceans. Even if we ceased emissions tomorrow, Bendel argues, the latest climate science shows that we are now in a climate emergency, which will increasingly disrupt our way of life. A societal collapse is now inevitable within the lifetimes of readers of this paper. Bendel puts a rough timeline on this. Collapse will happen within 10 years and inflict disruptions across nations, including increased levels of malnutrition, starvation, disease, civil conflict, and war. That's a very reasonable timeline given the science. Yet this diagnosis opens up far more questions than it answers. I was left wondering which societies are at risk of collapsing due to climate change, and when, some societies or all societies, simultaneously or sequentially, why some rather than others, and how long will the collapse process take? Where will it start, and in what sector? How will that impact other sectors, or will it take down all sectors of society in one fell swoop? And what does any of this imply for whether or how we might prepare for collapse? In attempting to answer these questions, I spoke to a wide range of scientists and experts and took a deep dive into the obscure but emerging science of how societies and civilizations collapse. I wanted to understand not just whether Bendel's forecast was right, but to find out what a range experts from climate scientists to risk analysts were unearthing about the possibility of our societies collapsing in coming years and decades. The emerging science of collapse is still, unfortunately, a nascent field. That's because it's an interdisciplinary science that encompasses not only the incredibly complex, interconnected natural systems that comprise the Earth system, but also has to make sense of how those systems interact with the complex, interconnected social, political, economic, and cultural systems of the human system, capitalized human system. What I discovered provoked a wide range of emotions. I was at times surprised and shocked, often frightened, sometimes relieved. Mostly I was unsettled. Many scientists exposed flaws in Bendel's argument. Most rejected the idea of inevitable near-term collapse outright, but to figure out whether a near-term collapse scenario of some kind was likely led me far beyond Bendel. A number of world-leading experts told me that such a scenario might in fact be far more plausible than conventionally presumed. So I'm going to end this video right here because it is incredibly long. There's too much to say. I don't want to have like a 30-minute video, so I'm going to split this up into 2 videos and come back tomorrow with another video. Just stay tuned. Tomorrow you'll see the second part of this video. Hope you enjoyed the first part of this video. Thank you so much for your eyes, your ears, and your conscience. If you would like to support this channel, you can do so at the links below. Until next time, peace.